Everyone, my name is Sean Hurst. I'm the Vice President of Technology for CCB. We're going to be talking about what Microsoft Azure can do for you in your organization. So just a quick show of hands, how many people here feel like you could discuss with someone what Microsoft's Azure solution sets are? Fantastic, I have one person. I'm ahead of the game, actually. So we're going to go over a little bit about Azure. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about CCB because some of you might be new to the organization. Some of you might have actually known us for quite a bit. I'm going to go over different solutions within the Azure big tent. And trust me, it's a huge tent, more like a three-ring circus. Trust me, it will make sense. We'll go over a very, very quick, very high-level overview and demonstrate some of the solutions, specifically infrastructure as a service, as well as platform as a service. And if you don't know what those terms mean, don't feel bad. I'm going to help you understand what those do. And then I'll have some time at the end of this for question and answers. So just a little bit about CCB. We were founded in 1991. We're actually a we're a local company. We're in Racine, Wisconsin. We help over 40,000 different nonprofit organizations throughout the entire country, as well as internationally. I'm so sorry that you're here. We're really interested in helping you save money on all of our solution areas, including with Microsoft. So we help find solutions for organizations that keep them from spending all of their money on Microsoft products. I'm so sorry. We are one of Microsoft's fastest growing cloud partners. We are also one of Microsoft's top 100 partners in this particular space. We've been talked about in Wall Street Journal. We're actually on the CRN Solutions top 500 list, and we actually made the top 250 overall. That was just actually announced a week and a half back, so I did not add that to this particular slide. We actually serve a number of different nonprofit organizations, quite a few of which I actually see in the room. Everywhere from Milwaukee Rescue Mission, Easter Seals of Northern Illinois, World Vision, National Geographic, Susan G. Komen. Those are all customers I've worked with in the past 90 days. We have traditionally been focused in that nonprofit space, but one of the benefits for this is we're very used to working with organizations that don't have a lot of money to spend on IT and really have to choose how that money is being spent very wisely. I use this example for World Vision. I could sell them a copy of Microsoft Office as a solution piece, or I can help them provide water for a village for 10 years. And we're talking about a difference of about $25. So we are very focused on making sure that you get the absolute maximum amount of money out of your investment for IT. I'm going to pitch this, and I'm going to make it really quick. I also head the services division. We actually provide services as well as solutions for all of our customer base. Whether it's, hi, I'd like to figure out how to actually make Office 365 work for me, to I'd like to build out my own custom CRM solution, hosting it in Microsoft Azure solutions with a full backend for development, repository, geo-redundant solution, and we go, sure, no problem. I got next Thursday free. I can get that done for you, bud. So we deal with relatively small to very complex solutions as part of our solution structure. We deal with the entire life cycle of this. And if you're interested in it, come and grab me after this. I'll be more than happy to talk with you about it ad nauseum. I apologize in advance. So, for those of you who were here earlier, you heard a little bit about cloud computing. I'm going to give you the same information. Specifically, cloud computing is defined by the National Institute of Science and Technology. It is an on-demand self-service architecture that deals with broad network access, resource pooling, rapid elasticity, meaning that you can actually shrink or grow that particular solution as necessary. Most importantly, as a measured service. And I'm coming from a nonprofit background on this, so I'm going to use the perfect example. You're running a small radio station, and it's Fund Drive Week. And Fund Drive Week, for those of you that have never volunteered with those particular organizations, is 4 months worth of work in advance. It's getting people to manage phones, computing resources, setting up a website to actually take the donations, setting up payment processors, dealing with logistics and all these particular structures. So half of the year they're getting ready for this, and then doing it, and then resting until the next time that they have to do it. The biggest piece for this has been historically for those organizations that are doing this, like Kubo in Colorado. that they buy computers, they use it for a while, it gets this huge spike of volume during that particular fund drive week, and then 350 days out of the year, it does nothing. Absolutely nothing. They still have to have it because they're never going to need it next year, but they're not really getting their value out of it. In solutions like this, we say, okay, why don't we set all of this up as a cloud-hosted solution in something like Azure? Now you're only paying for it while you're using it. When you're not using it, we shrink it down to the bare minimum of necessity. You can do your development work on it, you can test it out, and then when you need to scale it to tens of thousands of people calling in simultaneously, we just grow that solution to that point and then scale it back. So you're only paying for what you need when you need it. So, again, National Institute of Science and Technology, don't take my word for it, take the government's word for it, or not. So, when we talk about Azure solutions, what we're really talking about is a whole suite of solutions that incorporates things like infrastructure as a service, which is, we'll get through all these terms, so I'll just deal with this one. Platform as a service, even software as a service. Also, application development and application hosting, as well as identity management. That last one's going to be the thing that you're going to start hearing more and more and more about. And I'm going to give you a quick taste, but if you want to talk about it later, we'll talk about it. So, infrastructure as a service. Anyone know what that really means? Do you think you got a good handle on it? Anyone want to volunteer an answer? That's okay. Infrastructure as a service, a category of cloud computing services that provide a platform allowing customers to build and maintain the infrastructure typically associated with developing and launching a solution. That sounds like a lot of gobbledygook, and I wrote it. So, what it really boils down to is being able to leverage a solution platform in its totality. So basically, virtual machines, virtual networking infrastructure, those pieces of that as a infrastructure component, and then building a solution on top of that infrastructure. So, when you talk about, I need to build a server to host this application, infrastructure as a service is the area you're looking at. You have a lot more control over the structure. You can actually pick the operating system, the version, what application suites are loaded on it, middleware components. All of that is something you have direct control over. So, you can say, I need a Windows Server 2012 R2 Data Center Edition running IAS 7. I need to load apps.net on top of it, and I'm going to actually put 3 of those machines in there. I have 2 that are larger configurations that are running Microsoft SQL Server Enterprise, and I'm going to build out a SQL cluster on the back. If you're talking in terms like that, that's infrastructure as a service. So you're looking at virtual machines, virtual networking structure, storage. A lot of people don't necessarily think about this. You can use this as a back-end repository and connect to it just like you would connect to any other storage solution. It's going to be a little slower based on latency for internet connectivity, but if you have large-scale storage needs in multiple terabytes or petabytes, even exabytes, this is a solution you can actually look at for long-term archival and storage. Offsite backup. You have a couple of customers in here that I know that are specifically using this for offsite backup. Using not just Microsoft System Center Data Protection Manager, but also internal Windows backup. You can actually take the data that's living in your systems, back it up to local disk, and then back it up to Azure, and then do kind of interesting things with it, like site recovery. You can actually take that data, back up your virtual machines into Azure, and if heaven forbid a disaster occurs and your organization's not going to come up in the next 5 or 10 minutes, switch services over into Azure and run those virtual machines in that structure that we're running on your on-premise location. We'll actually talk about that as part of the demo that we're going to be doing in a little bit. So we've talked about infrastructure as a service. Now does everybody feel like you got a good handle on what that kind of means? Fantastic. So platform as a service. So we've talked about infrastructure as a service. Anyone want to take a stab at platform as a service? Pause. It has nothing to do with Easter eggs. Trust me. Okay. Platform as a service, a category of computing services that provide a platform allowing customers to develop, run, and manage web applications without maintaining the infrastructure underneath of it. A lot more gobbledygook. I'll give you the nice short version of this. If you have a specific web application, I don't care about how it's running on the back end. I just know that I want to run a WordPress site in the internet. Now you're looking at platform as a service. You don't care about, is it IIS, is it a LAMP stack, is it NGIX, is it basically NoSQL, MySQL, Microsoft SQL? You don't really have any knowledge, desire to even know about it. Now you're looking at platform as a service. Platform as a service gives you solutions like WordPress, Joomla, Ghost, MediaWiki, and .NET Nuke. And I didn't choose these ones just out of a lark. Anything that's generally running on a PHP stack, or a MySQL, NoSQL backend, or even MS SQL, they actually have templates built into Azure to literally go, I need a WordPress site and I need it to be in 3 different countries right now. Click from a grouping of boxes. You don't have to understand how all of it got built out. It builds it out for you in a fast, safe configuration, using industry best practices without having to know anything about what's going on in the back end. And then software as a service. Now, for those of you that were in the Office 365 demo, you should totally be able to give me an answer on this one. And if not, I'm going to go laugh at Logan after this. But software as a service, category of cloud computing services that provides a complete end-to-end solution. So a perfect example of this. We're looking at Office 365, hosted SharePoint solutions, remote app, which we have not talked about, but basically, who here has actually ever had to work in like a Citrix web farm, where you actually have to set up multiple Citrix servers? I can build a Citrix solution and a Citrix style solution in about 25-30 minutes using off-the-shelf applications and actually have it running on your iPad. Also, domain services. Through Azure Active Directory, you can actually even set up an Active Directory infrastructure, have people authenticate against it using Azure directly without having to have your own servers on premise with a domain controller or anything else. So, we did a lot of talk, yes?
Just a quick, dumb it down, because I'm the dumbest guy in the room. There's a bunch of analogies about infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and software as a service. And it's kind of like, the house analogy works, at least for me. Infrastructure as a service is you show up at the job site, and there needs to be this house constructed. It's going to solve some business problem, and technology is behind it. So you have to get all of the materials to build this house. Platform as a service, you kind of show up in the foundation and maybe the subfloors there, and you have a general understanding how to build walls, and then you take it from some point to get, again, to this point where you're using technology to solve a business problem. Software as a service, you roll up, and it's done. The heat's on, fireplace is going, food's in the oven, kids are tucked in for bed. It's a completed service that allows you to enable your business challenges or, solve business problems. And as you kind of conceptualize the way you go to market as a company in those areas, the level of sophistication increases as you go down. As you start with infrastructure as a service, highest level of complexity, middle, and then least with software as a service.
Absolutely. So before we dive into what's going to look like a really boring technical demo, but at the end of it will be something kind of cool, y'all have any questions? Because we got a little bit of that. Solutions where you would look at for infrastructure versus platform versus software as a service. Anything? Okay. So we're going to take a look at 2 different scenarios and solutions. We're going to look at infrastructure as a service, pulling out basically multiple virtual machines, build out, and basically looking at what those solutions look at the end. And we'll also look at the platform as a service model, building out a website ready to roll to actually have content loaded in by, say, a marketing department or something of that nature. So, I cheated a little bit. I logged in for you. But we're going to actually start with how many people have actually seen the Azure Portal for, okay. So this is actually, I think you guys launched this May or June of last year. It still has the lovely preview in the corner.
Keeps people excited.
Because this, I wanted to make sure I logged in before it because I know that Microsoft Build is coming up this week, and Invariably, the last time I tried to do this, they launched a product in the middle of me doing the demonstration, and this all changed on me. So I wanted to be logged in before I started. So what you're really looking at is a portal overview for this particular area, the service health, and we'll actually take a drill into that real quick. This is basically a quick map of all of the locations that Microsoft has a functional data center that are offering solutions. As you can tell, it's not just in the United States, and even within the United States, there's actually multiple levels of redundancy. For the record, the closest available data center to us is Central or North Central. North Central is actually just outside of Schaumburg,
yep.
For those of you that are actually playing at home.
And if there was a dollar sign, like next to this in terms of the investment Microsoft's making, because we're not, we're competing as well with other people that are doing the same thing, right? I think the number is $63 billion. So each of those places is considered a data center region, and within each of those regions there are actually 19 buildings, each of which house, I think they're big enough to hold like 2 DC-10s. Like that's what we're trying to accomplish, that at the end of this, I don't know, what's the term, fancy word, revolution, evolution, something, the goal is for Microsoft and other cloud providers to be able to sort of lower cost by increasing efficiency and scale for operating these massive data centers. I mean, that's the end goal for all of these people in the marketplace that are trying to win your business with the cloud. That's what we're trying to do.
So, for example, using that North Central area, the 2 DC-10s, looking at this particular structure, it looks like a whole series of shipping containers that are welded shut, that have power and data going into them through armored cables, and there are guards and the whole thing. Nobody actually goes into these particular structures. They're designed as, they're built, everything's running inside of them, and then they're sealed up so that no one actually has physical access to the equipment. All that this is actually doing is just giving you a service level overview, and thank you for having them all green today. It makes my life easy. But really, all that's looking at is the structure of the underlying systems. You can actually take a look. They have a marketplace, it's a billing, because that's a very important piece for me. I still have credit left, which means I can do the demo today. It'll be great. Why don't you give me more credit? Also, to prove that we're actually not just telling this, who here has been to CCB's website? If you registered, you probably had to go. Hey, look, we host it in Azure.
Yeah.
I can tell you actually how many people are going in there, what the backend for the structure is, actually what it's running under, how to actually get to it. And it's currently running, which makes me happy. So we're going to do the same thing on 2 different ways. We're actually going to build a web hosting infrastructure using both infrastructure as a service. So it means I'm going to build my own server with the operating system. I'm going to have IaaS up and running on it, and I'm actually going to run a website off of it. And I'm going to go back and do the exact same thing using the platform as a service model. And then you'll see how much easier it is in a second. So, for me to actually add up a new resource, I'm going to build a computer. And I'm going to have it run Windows Server 2012 R2 data center. Notice that it's not just Microsoft solutions in this particular structure. If I wanted to run a LAMP stack, it could be running in an Ubuntu. I could actually just build out a SQL Server input. I can build my own SharePoint farm. If I don't want to host it in Office 365, I can actually even load up my own system running Oracle, preloaded, ready to go. SA's already created the username and passwords, ready, waiting for me to log into. Remote app, or I can even get really kind of interesting and look at cloud services associated with this. I could roll my own platform, have it show up in the computing module, and actually upload pre-configured virtual machines that are ready to go. All I have to do is say, I need 12 of these. But for this one, we're just going to go through and do here. Anyone want to give me a name? Invariably, when I try to name these things, they're used. So, anyone? Thor? I'm going to go with that. Might actually be used as well. We'll call it Thor Web. Super secret password. Nobody pay attention. Oh no. Now, another reason I wanted to bring it up this way is so we can actually talk about pricing on this. We talked extensively about how this actually works. What you're really looking for is As these computing resources are actually in use, you can actually choose specific configurations. The out-of-the-box configuration for what's referred to as A1 or basic is a single processor box with a little under 2 gigs of memory, 2 attached operating systems, and it basically maintains 600 IOPS or IOPS in this configuration. Notice it's loading pricing for it. This might take a couple seconds. My pricing is a little bit off. But on the street level pricing, if I remember correctly, for A1, it's in the $56 to $58 range per month. So every time you're running a machine, per processor configuration, you can generally calculate it between $55 and $60 a month. Street pricing, just come in and buy it. And you're billed for a while that those resources are being utilized. Yes, sir?
You're using something like VMware or that type of thing. Does it bill you per server or does it bill you per host?
It bills you per server. You know, you wouldn't build a host inside of this because the backend structure for this, bear with me for a moment. The backend structure for this is actually a Hyper-V running on server 2012 R2. Almost exactly. Those guys actually have a little bit of changes to the backend configuration. So running a hypervisor on top of a hypervisor, not recommended. Can be done. It's not the best solution associated with this. Other questions? Now notice starting with this one, you can actually look at all the configurations. You can actually get very specific, a shared processor unit, pricing associated with it. And these get a little bit crazy. Let's use
16 core.
16 cores, 112 gigs of memory, 16 attached disks, 16 times 500 IOPS per disk, each one independently. It comes with auto-scaling configuration and a front-end load balancer. It's not inexpensive, but if you're running, and by the way, you're probably running SQL on top of that, or something relatively large. Now, I'll tell you from my perspective, because I do this a lot, I have never spec'd one of those machines. And I've spec'd them for organizations that are hosting on the order of, for a web-based application, 50,000 simultaneous users. There's 2 different directions you can scale for this. You can scale up, like bigger machines, and basically hosting it all in one configuration, or you can scale out. Lots of tiny little machines that are basically sitting in behind a load balancer. As long as your application structure is written in that way, that is the more cost-effective model because it gives you the ability to scale correctly. Meaning, if I only need one machine to actually host that application at that moment, I only need one machine. If I need 16 machines to handle it because I just wrote the best-selling book and Oprah basically put me on her show and everyone wants to see about that, I scale it out to 20 machines while that load is going through. Oh, by the way, I don't scale it because I'm busy talking to Oprah. This system will actually be able to scale it to that particular size automatically. So I'm not going to do that because Patrick will actually go nuts when I go, hey, I totally spent $20,000 on a demo. Oh, if you don't mind. But we'll just actually go for A1. I even have control over how the network configuration is done, how storage is done, what kind of diagnostic models I actually have. I have direct control over my default operating system settings. Where I want this actually to be located. Do I want it to actually join a domain automatically? I did not say Hawaii. I want to be in Hawaii. That might be a slip there. We'll put it in central. Don't even have. It actually puts it in a specific storage. Won't worry about the piece of this, but I will worry about this one component. Wouldn't be much of a web server if I don't actually set up the ability for people to get into it. Now, We're going to show you a couple of quick things on this one. This is probably one of the most interesting pieces of this. Microsoft has worked directly with third-party partners to actually automate the installation of software that you absolutely should have on some of your machines, like antivirus. I would like some of that, please. And just that's great. Now my antivirus solution will be pre-configured on my box before I even start. I didn't go into all those particular pieces. As you actually go in, Symantec, McAfee, Kaspersky, I believe, has actually done components for that for anti-malware. You also saw a bunch of other solutions. Anyone here familiar with Puppet Labs or Chef? Puppet Labs and Chef are system automation software, where I would like to build 1,000 of these. I want every machine to be exactly the same configuration. The only change I want is the name of the machine, and I want that name to correspond to what its IP address has been given as its initial build out. In Puppet, that takes 4 lines of code, including the line that says, now go build it. You put the agent on those particular machines, you actually have complete control over this. I would be more than happy to talk to you about those systems automation pieces. It's the way that basically organizations get the most money and utilization out of the resources they're using by automating this particular piece. Notice it also even tells me what image version would I like to start with. How many people here on a regular basis have to build machines for your organization? Okay, what's the worst thing about actually building the machine from disk by default?
Takes
Okay, after you've built the operating system, then what?
all the configuration.
And then patching. What do you say? Like, I have to run, oh great, I'm done building out this machine, now I'm going to run Windows Update. I'm going to go to lunch. Maybe I'll come back tomorrow. It will take a while. Unless you're using something like System Center Configuration Manager or WSUS where you have a local copy of it. It's got to download it. It's got to reply all the machines. It takes time. This one are pre-generated images with, as of March 2015, on the 12th, that machine was patched and updated and ready to go at that moment. It always goes one revision behind. By the way, why don't you have the 8.1 up? And you can actually even determine performance monitoring characteristics. Since I'm running a website, I'm probably going to turn on insights into that piece. Oh, no, I won't, because I'll actually turn on the wrong one. I won't do that. Nope. Actually, you didn't ask me where I want to build it. It's trying to put it in Texas for me. I don't want to be in Texas. I want to be in Chicago. So, this is about as exciting as watching paint dry. What it's actually doing in the back end is building out the machine in its entirety. It's actually configuring all the resources in that north central data center. It actually is going through and tying that resource specifically to a bundle of machines as part of a work group. It's giving it a publicly available IP address, a private internal address. It's setting up an endpoint for me to actually be able to connect to it. All of the resources for that are actually being calculated and loaded. And then it's making a duplicate copy back in some other data center. And then another backup copy of that in some other data center. In the event that the north central data center actually is no longer available because flooding from the lake, I can't really come up with a reason off the top of my head. You know, the monster that ate Sheboygan goes down to Chicago and eats Schaumburg. Sheboygan, Schaumburg, it got confused. So those resources are actually being duplicated in other locations. So that in the event that I actually have a service availability or something goes down in that particular location, to give me some level of redundancy in this particular structure. And I'm vamping because this is going to take about 5 minutes.
So all the licensing for the Windows Server and the software that is available so far, that's all included in the monthly?
With some limitations. The operating system licensing is included. Absolutely. When you're paying for the monthly solution, it's coming for your operating system cost. So if you're purchasing a retail copy of Windows Server 2012 R2 Data Center, hey Aaron, how much is that?
I don't know.
$2,500?
Maybe, yeah. Data center?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's maybe a little more than that.
Let's call it $2,500 as retail for just the operating system. $60 a month,
Okay.
or $2,500 to get the operating system license, plus client access licensing, plus anything else that's running on it. You can see where this actually reduces costs for organizations that have to pay full retail. For nonprofit organizations, it's a little bit different. Nonprofits get significantly reduced pricing from Microsoft, thank you very much, in the tune of 70 to 80% off of the retail costs associated with it. The operating system, however, lets you do things like, I'm going to build one of these and now I'm going to replicate it out to 15 machines. $2,500 times 15 gets really expensive really fast. There are limits, however. SQL licensing is not included. So when you're installing software on top of this, that licensing is not incorporated. So if I go in here and say, I'm going to install this machine and then get a copy of SQL Server 2014 Web Edition, I'd have to pay the $500 licensing fee. Or I could build a machine with SQL on the back end. If it builds with that particular operating system configuration and that it will actually say it in the cost associated with it, that is included as part of the cost of operating the machine. And they have different sizing available with this. Or you can even get really interesting is I don't want to maintain the back-end machine on it at all. I just want to get SQL Server 2014 and I want to put a database inside of it. And then we talk about platform or software as a service, where you actually can host those particular solutions directly. All right, while we're actually finishing this, I'll move away from this for just a second and let it finish. Then we'll talk about platform as a service. Yeah. All right. So I want to, out of those lists of platforms and services, is there anyone that wants someone, because I must have built about 300 WordPress sites, and I was interested in maybe to do something else. How about Joomla? I hear that's kind of interesting. Anyone here familiar with Joomla? Everyone's familiar with WordPress, right? Basically, it's a content management system. Joomla is the same thing. Basically, this builds out a solution. It's based on PHP and MySQL. So we're going to build a website, post it on Joomla. And it's going to ask me a couple quick questions. We're going to call it Joomla Group. Because I like that name. And it's available. My typing isn't usually this bad, but typing on Podium is a little different. And this is where we actually talk about the difference between platform as a service and infrastructure as a service. Platform as a service is priced on a different tiering model. So a platform, you don't really care what the underlying system is running on. This could be, the underlying platform, this could be Server 2012 R2, it could be CentOS, it could be Red Hat Enterprise Linux, it could be anything of that nature. You don't care. All you really care about is it presenting the front end to you that you need for the application that you're interested in this platform. So notice the pricing is a little bit different. We have a basic, standard, and a premium platform. The basic platform has a slightly smaller space. It actually has some limited instances. Custom domains are a little bit more limited, and storage is there. Standard is basically where it positions. You're looking at larger storage, a larger number of publicly available IP addresses, automatic backup, automatic slots for basically doing staging and production services. So if you actually want to go, I'd like a development version of this, and I'd like to then move it from development into a quality assurance test, so my marketing group can go, yes, we can actually publish this. And then I want it to actually be on the public site, and I want it so that when they've approved it and it's gone through this workflow, that automatically the one that's approved goes into the production site and the other one becomes staging. All of that's managed within the structure. You don't have to build any of that. You don't have to build multiple servers and have them in different areas, and this one has one set of FTP credentials and this one has a different one. It's all one centralized component. And then you can get kind of crazy for much larger organizations with, that are using desktop. They have multiple backup slots that they want to do with multiple web slots that they want to do, geo-redundant, geo-available data center locations, where they want to, I would like a copy of this web application to be in every one of Microsoft's data centers, so that if someone is actually accessing this from Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia, they're actually not coming to the US to do it, they're actually going to Kuala Lumpur. That's what you look at generally in preview. My website is probably not going to get a lot of traffic from Kuala Lumpur. So we're just going to actually choose a geo-available location that actually is doing basically what I need. And it's saying that this is actually in use. And that is the world's worst URL, so I'm taking something different. And that one's available. Only other thing I have to tell it is what kind of database I want this to actually be residing in. And I want to use a new MySQL database, and I want it to be in Brazil. And I'm going to hit OK. And now I'm creating that website. And how many people here are like me and do all your shopping through Amazon? If you can shop through Amazon, you can totally do this. You can actually build a website or an infrastructure for your organization and hand it off to a group to actually finish delivery for that piece. If you can do that, you can. Yes, sir.
One of my hurdles in picking or moving to Azure, and you may have a solution for this, is SQL Server.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to see what options we have in terms of separating out like the temp DB performance, log files, transaction log files versus data files.
Absolutely. We got a minute or two, and it won't take that long. In most cases, that's not something, if you're doing SQL Server 2014 or 2012, as it's Azure SQL is actually referred to, don't have to worry about it. You say, I'd like a database. It needs to be this size, and I need this many, I need it to be able to handle this many transactions per minute, and I need this many simultaneous connections into it. And it goes, okay, this is what you need. It does all the back-end calculations for you, and gives you some level of control over the performance counters. But there's actually even a calculator that tells you, tell me about your application, tell me about how many people are using it, how is the application structured, are you written in the following languages, yes, yes, yes. You go through all about 15 minutes worth of work, and at the end of it, it says, you want this size, you want it in this locations, this is how your data structure should actually look at, and if you have a production database, we'll connect to your production database, pull the analytics, and then recalculate it to make sure.
And is it a full SQL server? Can we use SQL Management Studio to connect to it, write stored procedures?
I'll tell you a quick story. I had a customer who was on one of those previous slides who wanted a full-end custom CMS solution. They actually picked the vendor for this particular piece. The vendor will remain nameless because of the details of the story. By the way, Core Web is actually built up. They said, we want to host this in Azure because we have an existing hosting solution, and they're charging us on the order of about $2,000 a month for 6 machines, physical. And I went, that's crazy. We can totally do better than this. So we sat down with them, we looked at the end, we actually got the vendor involved associated with us. We went through their complete solution and architecture suite. We said, okay, We want to do this in Azure. We're going to build 2 front-end solutions running your CMS piece. We're going to run a back-end solution using Azure SQL Backup. We're going to put 2 additional servers plus an indexing server. We're going to put them all into one cloud resource, and we're going to actually separate them out and have them tie back into your on-premise data center with VPN tunnels, as well as your existing cloud-hosted or your hosting solution through another VPN tunnel. One side had Juniper as their endpoint. One side had Cisco. Now, in the course of about a month and a half, we got all of this set up. We got the infrastructure in place. We loaded their application on. It went through quality assurance testing. Everyone said, this is great. They moved their application onto that particular system. Worked great until they ran their back-end analysis tool set on the production SQL database, at which point it kind of started dragging. We got the application vendor involved. And they said, yeah, we totally told you we were going to support SQL Server 2014, but we're wrong. We found a production piece. It has to be 2012. By the way, this was already in production. That evening, I was able to build out 2 additional VMs for their particular version, loaded up SQL Server 2012, got an active passive failover cluster for that using High Availability Suite, moved their application from SQL 2014 onto this particular suite, and then made the next deliverable deadline with the full backend plus backups for their SQL pieces and on-premise, and then tied it back into their VPN structure. I didn't sleep in those 24 hours, but we were actually able to get a functional solution back, even on a specific version, and we did all the migration from their production database, which was in Azure SQL Backup, onto their production, their new system we built using SQL Management Studio by just saying, here it is, go get the data, pull it back over, and set the permissions correctly. And their DBA was like, well, where's the cloud-hosted database backup? It's right there. But that looks like a SQL server. It is a SQL server. So how do I know if it's a cloud-hosted one or if it's on-premise? You don't. It's exactly the same from your perspective. That's actually how it worked. Literally was floored about it. He was like, so I can do this with other stuff? Oh, yes. Just not this particular CMS. So he moved all their analytics off of that particular structure into a SQL 2014 because it gave him more access to do long-term analysis. You had another question.
On the question of performance tuning, we use, we're a healthcare company, so we use NextGen for our EMR software, and they want us to create like 18 or 20 based on how many processor cores we have. They want to create multiple TempDB files. So I'm assuming we'll have control over TempDB, or do we let SQL handle it at that point?
If you want to get that granular, you might want to be looking at the infrastructure as a service component. Okay. A good example of a production company I know that's doing that right now, we talked about this previously, is a company called VAR Commerce. They're moving their entire cloud hosting solution into Azure. They're a back-end solution provider for value-added resellers. They do a cloud-hosted infrastructure component. All of their back-end system for all of their database that's tying into all of the distribution partners is located in Azure right now, and they're dealing with that same issue. If you have very specific tuning requirements, you build out a structure in this using infrastructure as a service, you run SQL on top of it, you move your licensing with it, and you have absolute complete control over how every piece of it's run. Yes, sir.
Is there some kind of a calculator out there that you can get to ahead of time before you buy into this to see what it might cost you for one?
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
Whatever that might be.
It's pretty sophisticated. There's also a tool, and I can never remember the name of it. It's like I think it might even be called like a cost estimator tool, and it's I use the wrong term all the time. I'm going to say sniffer, but it's not a sniffer because that's bad. But it's run inside the 4 walls of a company's infrastructure to measure compute. Okay, so what are the VMs doing and how much sort of data transfer is there and this and that. It gives you a kind of a report. And it'll actually steer you to some of these A2, S1, B5, whatever SKUs in the Azure Direct model that you can purchase from.
Microsoft's Analysis and Planning Toolkit, or MAPT, M-A-P-T. You run it in your environment, it collects the performance counters off of your specific machines. Right. It says, based on my workload over a day, an hour, a month, the peak utilization I've seen for that machine or this grouping of machines, or your entire enterprise, you will need the following. And it actually builds a file that you copy over to the portal, and it builds that number of machines for you.
Can you get that from here?
Yeah.
The other question is, you have blocks that had like certain configurations to them. Are you able to play with those configurations, or are they pretty static or fixed?
For the memory and CPU utilization, they are pre-configured, but there's a lot of flexibility. There's high CPU models where not as much memory, but a lot of processor, and the reverse. Low processor count, high memory utilization. And you were asking like, hey, here's an A1, $55.06 is its price. And then that's for Windows. Notice they have pricing associated for Linux virtual machines, Oracle DBA, Oracle databases, BizTalk, SQL, what your bandwidth costs, how much you want for support, and it will calculate those components out. Obviously, they're opening the doors, so we're a little bit short on time. I do apologize. At the very least, what you're looking at is exactly what we saw before. What its utilization looks like, what the connection actually looks like to that particular machine, the remote access to it, what its IP addressing is, how it's actually configured. And when you hit open, it'll come up on this screen because I'm on a work. Having multiple screens. And for those of you that have ever used remote desktop, that's all this really is. You have a direct remote desktop session into that particular infrastructure. Anything that you can do on a Windows machine, it is a Windows machine, including remote PowerShell, which is how we do a lot of our internal components for this. Is we set up 10, 20, 30 of these machines at a time, set them up as a particular remote setting groups, say you are all this particular subsection. I want to execute the following command against all of you simultaneously and go. Maintain 1, 10, 100, 1,000 machines the same way. Any other questions while we're staring at a black screen while we're waiting for it to actually let me log in? Yes, sir.
One other role that we have is a fax server. So I'm guessing we can't obviously put a fax server on Azure Portal.
Actually, I have. There are units that you can use for network-based fax services. You basically have a SIP trunk endpoint that actually is using T.38. That delivers that service into a fax solution, and you basically have a virtualized fax line coming in via SIP trunking. And then the endpoint in the software, like WriteFax, the equivalent thereof, is actually running in infrastructure as a service.
Now, the fax server that we use that's dependent on this EMR solution, they're not compatible with SIP trunks, unfortunately. So if I host that locally, like my SQL server is on the Azure cloud, can I set up an MPLS cloud or an IPsec VPN and then have it still connect to the Azure database?
Yes. There are 3 different MPLS providers that tie directly into Microsoft data centers. And actually, for all intents and purposes, it just shows up as another endpoint off of your MPLS network. It delivers directly on the inside of the virtual network interface for the traffic manager. So it comes up in its own IP addressing structure in your organization, and it looks like just another hop. And we do something similar in our regard. It's about a 9 millisecond latency between Racine, Wisconsin, and the Schaumburg location for those services. Yeah, I'll give you specifics because we do the same sort of thing. If you have any other questions, please come up and talk to me. It was a pleasure. I know this is a very dense subject. I appreciate your forbearance and not drawing too much in your face.